वाहेगुरु 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 वाहेगुरु.
All right, so Sukhchandan, we've had conversations previously about leadership, and today we're going to focus on symbology and leadership. And I'll ask a few questions about some of the symbols in Sikhi that are really important to us, and let's see what we think in terms of the meaning of these symbols. So let me start first of all with the symbol of Kaur and Singh. You know, I know that, you know, we both use Kaur in our names. Now, I know like the literal meaning, very often people just start talking about the literal meaning of Kaur and Singh, but here we're talking about symbolically. So symbolically, it was about creating equality between the different members of society. People, before the titles of Kaur and Singh were bestowed on us by Guru Gobind Singh Ji, he was trying to eradicate these inequalities in terms of caste. And so when we adopt the name Kaur and Singh, we're showing that we believe in equality for one thing, and there's also this creation of kinship. We feel that we're part of an extended family when we see another person who's got the title of Kaur, because, you know, it's like we could be cousins, we're members of the same extended family. So my question here is about, we know in terms of leadership, we know that when we feel a strong sense of affinity with other people, it's much easier to be influential, because we can assume those shared values and shared history. But what about when we're in places like you and I are in? I know that you work in an organization where probably there are not that many Sikhs, so there's not a lot of people called Kaur and Singh. How do we create that sense of affinity when we find ourselves maybe like the only Sikh there? How do we create an affinity with those who are not Sikhs, who are not Kaur and Singh?
I think it is quite difficult. I think racism plays its part into it. So therefore, there's a sense of inequality not within people who share the same name as me, but with other people. And with that inequality, it's trying to find what are the commonalities with other people, in terms of, because when you looking at each religion, when you actually strip it down, the basic quality principles are of equality, and it's relating to people at that human level, and part of that is really part of me. I am Kaur, and I would never. No, I will never not include name Kaur in my name, because that's part of me. That's me. That represents me as a Kaur. But it's quite difficult. It's quite a challenge to create that affinity with other people, if I'm honest with you. I sometimes it's very difficult with people with who we do not share, not necessarily the name, but also more than that. It's about other conditions that come into play.
Because when we live in an environment, you know, like I live in an environment where there are no other Sikhs in my local neighborhood. So, but I get on very well with my neighbors, because we share, you know, obviously we share a similar space, don't we? So we feel this kind of affinity because we live very near each other. And when I work, my colleagues, we have shared interests in terms of education. There are those I feel close to because they have similar values to myself. And so even though they're not Sikhs, I feel a strong sense of affinity with them. So we can create like trust and form strong relationships with people based on values, depending on what's most important to us. But we both working in environments where they are diverse environments, but maybe we are the only person who is a Sikh in those environments. And so for leadership, to gain the trust of others, because it's about mutual trust and mutual respect and mutual affinity. Sometimes it can be difficult to become trusted because people trust others who are similar to them, not those who appear to be different or, you know, have very different values?
I think in the way what I have done, rightly or wrongly, I think it is really creating that professional connections, common goals in our profession. Really, what is it that we are trying to achieve? What is our profession trying to achieve? And within that, what is my, for example, I work with children who have often always have been abused or neglected, and my role is, my passion and my aim is to make a difference to those children's lives, for that they achieve the best they can give. So it's having those those professional goals with other people, and part of that is really, as a Sikh, we have always helping the vulnerable, helping people. I think those Sikh values are kind of really permeate through my professional
Absolutely.
goals.
So, yes. So us Sikhs, we believe very strongly and very deeply about equality, and we want to help those who are vulnerable. And there are many others. They're not Sikhs, but they may have no religion whatsoever, but they still share those values of wanting to defend the vulnerable and wanting to eradicate injustices and inequalities. And so we can feel that sense of affinity with others who share the values, even though they may not be Sikhs, right?
Andy, that's right.
Yeah.
So with that, because with my, as I said, with my the Sikh values that I have grown up, and they are very much in congruence with my professional values, and that's what it, rather than part of me trying to hide away, it's very much day-to-day part of that. My principles, my values that I have as a Sikh are very much interwoven with my professional values, because they enhance each other.
Mm. So at the professional level, we can become very respected and established in our professional roles, because there are many others, diverse range of people who share similar values, and yet we can find it very difficult to rise to the senior leadership positions where it's about decision making, the real decisions that really make a difference. And at those places, that's when it can be very challenging to be trusted to rise above our stations into those positions, because in those spaces we may not appear to have the interpersonal skills that are required to have strong relationships of trust and being valuable.
I think that's a reality. That is a reality, and I haven't found any solutions to that to date.
But we experience it, though, don't we? We do experience that.
I definitely experience it. I definitely experience it, because I think into not only having that the cultural capital, and also having those contacts, it's very much you are entering into the world where those people already have those connections with each other, and trying to break into that. Do you then adopt those people's values which might conflict with yours? I am one of those who have not really compromised with my values, so I'll compromise with my, going up the ladder.
Yes, because you see, some people do, in order to gain that trust, some people do change their names. They will adopt anglicized names, and and in a desire to fit in a desire to become similar to those who are in those top positions. For yourself and myself, maybe that's not, it doesn't fit our own kind of way of it's not in integrity with our own values, but there are people who try to do that in order to gain that affinity, right?
That happens, you see that, but then that becomes their choice. I cannot make that choice, and I will not. My name remains my name, and it for me, it's very important to me that people actually say my name. I often get called something else, and then they'd say, what can we call you? And I say, well, it's by my name. And you just get this look. And some people will try, other people say, no, 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 we can't say. I said, I'm prepared to help you saying my name, but I would like you to make the effort.
Yeah.
I don't want you to give me a name which is not mine. It doesn't belong to me. It doesn't feel like me. But so part of that identity is it's quite strongly embedded in me. And so Sukhchandan Kaur, and often, when you're being cross-examined in court, and rather than calling Kaur, there's a Kaur, and I correct them, and they go back to the same Mrs. Kaur. And some people across, they are aware of what the correct pronunciation is, and they would kind of correct the other person, but it becomes tiring. It becomes tiring and distracting from what you're there for, because it becomes about you. But yeah, as I said, I think yes, I know people who are quite happy to just shorten their names, and Amajit becomes Amy, and then Suki become, and people just make that assumption with me that it's okay to call me Suki or Sue, and I correct them very politely. Very politely say, excuse me, but that's not my name. Other times I get, sorry, you go.
Jess, and I mean, my friends can call me Jess, but in the workplace, I'm not Jess, so like yourself, it's I think, in a formal context, we need to have our names respectfully pronounced and respectfully stated, respectfully spelt, etc. So let me go on to the next thing about symbolism. So what about the symbolism of the script that our gurus gave us? Guru Nanak Ji and Guru Angad Dev Ji, they created Gurmukhi script. At the time, Punjabi was only an oral language, but they created Gurmukhi to provide a written version of the Punjabi oral dialect at that time. And this is an example of leadership and innovation. They created something that didn't exist to empower people to become literate, to be able to write in a script that was unique, it was distinct, it was for Sikhs. This was not a script that existed. It wasn't Farsi, it wasn't Hindi, it wasn't Arabic. Our gurus didn't use the script that was of the ruling classes at that time. They created a new script for the masses, basically. And
I didn't know that.
Oh yes, Guru Angad Dev Ji, this was taken from the Landa script, which existed, but they reorganized it, and so this is innovation. And we can just assume, like, why did they create a new script for our language rather than using something that existed already? And it's like, that's what innovators do. Innovators, they create something that doesn't exist to meet the needs of people. And and now my question is, so at the time, Gurmukhi was a new script that was created, and it was not the ruling kind of script of Farsi and Sanskrit and Arabic and whatever. But now, 500 years later, Gurmukhi, in terms of our advancement, in terms of education, in terms of social mobility, I suppose, have we advanced the Gurmukhi in terms of its position in relation to the ruling languages, which now are English and Hindi in India, in terms of like its kind of positioning against these languages of the rulers? How have we advanced it? How have we become innovative using Gurmukhi? And if not, why not?
I think it has remained very regional, but on the positive that it is recognized at international level as a language. So when you're looking at various different languages, it is there. But I do not think really that it has made a place where I would have liked to see it. and or many other people would like to see positioned. Because if you think about really, I'm thinking going back to my growing up, I grew up in Punjab. My language was Punjabi first of all. Then I think from your class 3 Hindi gets introduced, and from class 6 or 7, um, class 6 English gets introduced. And then what you see is, whilst Punjabi is your mother tongue and that's the main language, that actually becomes minority as you progress through. Because then I went into college, it was all English medium.
So, yeah, so this is the question, you see. So in terms of our own self-development as Sikhs, it's as though we have succumbed to the power of the ruling classes in the same way that people were 500 years ago. When, you know, yes, we do have our own script now, but we're not using our own script. We're using the script which is the, you know, synonymous with the, in terms of we could say like elite, you know, it's the languages of the rulers, the languages of like material success, I suppose. We're still advancing ourselves in those languages rather than in Gurmukhi, aren't we?
Absolutely. Even if you go to India, where you would see people speaking in Hindi when they're talking formally, unless it's regional, it's practical, it's very local.
Yes.
You wouldn't, yeah, it's even the news are not in Punjabi, they're all in Hindi, unless they are in Punjab. It has just, I feel that it just remained regional. I don't see anybody advancing it or promoting it other than ourselves.
Yeah, it's as though it's still kind of like associated with rural life. You know, Punjabi is like for the rural, the village people, you know, rather than the city, that rather than the urban life of media. And
you're absolutely right. And I grew up in a village, and Punjabi was the language. And I remember at the age of, I think I would have been 14, visiting my sister in Chandigarh, who was doing her Doctor of Medicine at the time at the PGI hospital. Now, I was very much used to speaking in Punjabi, but I found myself aligning myself talking in Hindi words, even though I wasn't fluent in Hindi, and because everybody else was talking in Hindi, and then I joined army. Okay, you would expect to speak English, but Punjabi words we hardly, other than really among us, a few of us among ourselves. It's almost, there was a kind of expectation that you do not speak that language. It's just, and I have to say, I am as guilty. I didn't particularly promote. I think I succumbed to the pressures because that was expected of you at the time. And if you couldn't speak proper Hindi and English, then you could be very fluent. Oh, we were very fluent in written and spoken Punjabi. That didn't count for anything.
you couldn't advance. Yeah. So in order to advance in life, you had to speak the language of the rulers, English, Hindi, and
absolutely. And I think you're raising really some very pertinent questions. And at the age of 60, I'm thinking I should have been doing more to it to advance it. But why didn't I? Because I think you conform. I think I have to say conform to the expectations that are around you.
Well, it's been like that for 500 years, hasn't it?
Yes, it certainly has been in my lifetime. That's what I can really say. Well, I grew up in Punjabi, was very important language, very lovely language, and why? What's happened?
There was a reason our gurus gave us our own script. There was a reason that they created Gurumukhi for us rather than using what already existed. They could have used what already existed to write the Gurbani, but they didn't. They created something new. And yeah, so I think that it forms a part of our identity because it was the Gurbani is written in Gurmukhi. So let me ask you about another symbolic ritual that the Gurus introduced us to, and that was Guru Nanak Ji created the first langar, the Sacha Sodda story, where he was feeding the hungry spiritual people, and then he created this system where everyone had to sit on the floor and eat together using the same utensils. And that was a radical act at that time, because in those days, people from different castes were not, they wouldn't eat, the higher caste wouldn't eat with those from the lower caste. They wouldn't eat using the same utensils. So this transformed behavior in a way, didn't it? By symbolizing equality, symbolizing that, the old ways of doing things where you segregate people based on their caste, that's no longer acceptable. We sit together and we eat as though we're part of the same family. That was a radical act of transformation, wasn't it?
It certainly was, yes. With langar, I think, as you said, really sitting on the same level with everybody. And as growing up, I think part of that, you're growing up the values of sharing Kirtaguru and Vanshako. That is very much, I can remember those words consistently being used by my mom, who is usually your best teacher. We always, and I have to say, in terms of my values, what I have been able to do is really, as a one person, to actually be congruent with my values and how I live my life. I may not go to the Gurudwara. I've cut my hair. Yes, I have. I can explain that another day. But in terms of the values of treating everybody equal, whether somebody's here or somebody there, even in a hierarchy, behind those titles, people are humans.
And I suppose in terms of leadership, it's like that, sitting on an equal basis. It applies to leadership because the way we make decisions as leaders, it's like through consensus, through, like, rather than hierarchical, like one person being at the top making all the decisions. It's like, let's sit together in a committee, like the Panch Pyare, five people come together, and through consensus, you come to an agreement through consensus of equals rather than a hierarchical.
Absolutely. And in during my time as the chair of Nigalro, where I was the chair of national organization, and that change was seen and by everyone, because I had chairs before me who were decision makers, whereas I involved other people into decision making. I sought the people's views, and we thought, and even though I knew really which way I thinking I wanted to go, but I still sought the people's views and looked at, looked at my own thoughts objectively. And I remember a lot of people, especially the officers of the meeting, of the council, who had not been involved previously. They felt, first time we know exactly what's happening in the organization, how the decisions are being made, what decisions we are making. And I think that I brought that with me. Yeah, in my day-to-day job, where I work with children and we're chairing child protection conferences, I make decisions. If it's a child's review, then I make a decision with the child. If the child is well and able to, old enough and has the understanding to do that, and children where parents have been accused of being, abusing their children, I sit with them in a meeting, thinking, okay, this is what we're worried about. How are we going to do things? How are we going to make a difference? So it's very much be involving in that and bringing those values into every single day of my life.
Yeah. And that's what the Gurus taught us, isn't it? About, involving everyone, as you say, and on a level playing field, so you don't feel that you are the superior person who has the right and the authority to make the decision. It's like everyone is equal, and you listen to everyone's point of view, and you collaborate to come to a decision.
Yes, and I think that culture is not always reflected in the outside world that you're operating in. And sometimes some people might say it, You haven't got the confidence to make a decision. You're asking other people. You think, no, I'm very capable of making a decision, but it's for me, it's involving everybody, treating everybody equal, and inviting other views. Somebody else's views may be very different from mine, and could be very creative and constructive.
Yeah.
When you put different perspective into a decision making, it's a healthier decision.
Yeah, absolutely. Because even Guru Gobind Singh Ji, he consulted, didn't he? He consulted the Panch Pyare, and he listened to their views rather than simply dictating what what he thought was the best way forward. Now, this symbol of Guru Gobind Singh Ji on a horse, in terms of being professionals, sometimes as professionals, we're expected to stay in our own lane. We're expected to not rise above our station. And this image of Guru Gobind Singh Ji, for me, it symbolizes rising above our station. It symbolizes, because, at that time, some members of society, the lower caste, they were not allowed to ride on horses, but he allowed everyone to ride on horses. And so that again is just like the langar. This is a radical act enabling people to take on the leadership position, that you didn't have to be of a certain caste to take on leadership positions. Everyone was able to take that position and to rise above their station. So for you, in terms of being a leader in the professional world, do you kind of like also have that thing that sometimes we're expected to not rise above our station?
I can identify with that. In April, I resigned from Nagalro for various reasons. But I think what I see in my other day-to-day role, that I do my job with the local authority, because of my other roles, I've had a much more kind of more a national overview perspective on issues and that affect locally. I recall, really, if I ever raise an issue, my immediate manager always kind of tried to kind of shush me. Didn't want me to say more than what. Now, I don't know what her agenda was, but I always felt each time you try to rise, there's expression this way, directly, indirectly. And it's almost, as you say, stay in your lane, stay in your station, you do not belong anywhere else. And it's hard.
Yeah,
It's hard.
and so our gurus taught us to rise above our station in a way, but how do we do that? How do we create spaces in the Western world, which, where we are sometimes treated in the same way that people in the lower castes are treated in India, those who are considered to be, from the lower caste, even now, even in contemporary society. Sometimes we are treated that way as foreigners. We're treated as though we can arrive at X point, but we can't rise above that X point because...
Absolutely. And what I say is really that this is really up to here. I can jump up and down as much. Yes. I cannot go up there.
But not, you can't.
Not there. Mm-hmm. But yeah, here I can do it. And then the ceiling point, I do see based on where I am in the hierarchy.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and our gurus taught us how to break through. That they taught us how to break through these chains and create spaces. So that the act of riding on a horse was a radical act, saying, yeah, I too can be a leader. But there was a lot of courage involved in doing that, because people from the lower caste could be killed for riding a horse, so there is a lot of risk involved. So how do we create our own spaces where we are not waiting for other people to allow us to enter? We create our own spaces that, where we feel that we have the right to enter, because we've created those spaces. We have ownership of those spaces.
think, Dr. Malik, that the very fact that we are having this discussion and you thought about that, I think this needs to be widespread. I think you need to drive this, and then we will be behind you, and then create that. It's. I think you need that leader to to awake the leader inside, because we are leaders inside. I think sometimes under the circumstances or whatever the situations are, we tend to kind of at times conform to them.
Yeah.
And I think rather than as a Sikh woman, that being my strength, that is, I need for that to remain as a strength and become stronger and stronger. And I think what we do need there is, I think we do need like-minded people. We need to have that identity, and we need to have that, as a theory emerging. So this is, it's there, but it need to put it. We need to put it out there in the wider world for it to be recognized, for it to be accepted, and for Sikh people to identify with that and get the best out of what they already have in them, to bring it out. And I really do hope and first admire the work you're doing, and I really do hope really it leads to at a much wider level, this way and that way, so that it spreads and people can start to identify with it and have that strength, even more strengthened.
Thank you. And I know that you're a leader in the work that you do. And so it's, this is about creating dialogues with people who've reached, the height, the pinnacle of their profession. And because it's only at that point are you aware of what is going on, because there are many others who haven't arrived at the point that you've arrived, so they don't even realize that there is that ceiling, but you've recognized the ceiling because you hit it.
I certainly did hit it. Yes, yes, I hit it.
Yeah. All right, brilliant.
Yeah.
So let's go on to the Nishan Sahib. So in every leadership, when we triumph, we celebrate our triumphs by claiming, celebrating our success. So in a way, the Nishan Sahib symbolizes our success after having gone through all these struggles. Our ancestors have gone through so many struggles for hundreds of years, and now we have the right to claim spaces where we create gurdwaras, sacred spaces where we have the right to do things according to our Sikhi values. So for you, in terms of the Nishan Sahib, like what else could we do in order to celebrate our successes? What is it that we can be proud of in terms of what we have achieved up to now?
I think it may not answer your question, but then I think one of the things really, even if we take the names, you will find that really the first name and the surname Kaur is disappearing. There's a sense of shame. I don't know what it is. It's a shame or it's bringing that pride in it, feeling proud of that. That's part of my name. With regard to Nishan Sahib, I'm really thinking out loud, really, how do we create our spaces? And I think really I have to come back to what I said before. I think in creating a space, really, it is, I really look forward to, the work that you're doing and creating that, you have created this space to have this dialogue in order for me to be even aware of what Sikhism has contributed to the world. And why is it not being advanced? Why our language is not where it should be? And I think in that, I think there's a lot of much whether ignorance or lack of awareness. And I do find that I think our gurdwaras don't really serve our children very well. They're not able to connect with them. They're just not. I see parties are being brought from India, but they're not really party properly. They're not really able to connect with people. They're not able to uh, give, communicate
That's what we were
the
saying.
strength.
Yeah, that's what we were saying earlier about the importance of affinity and empathy. So somebody could be a bhatti and they're called Singh, and or it could be a female and called Kaur, but if they can't empathize with those that they want to influence, then there is no influence, because influence only occurs if they can empathize with the children. And once we've lost that empathy, then there isn't that relationship for the influence to traverse.
And I do worry the future. I do worry because I don't think, rather than increasing, I feel the influence. I remember in my days when we were raising children, there was still that contribution from the Gurdwara with Punjabi classes, with music classes. People were still involved, and I see that they've kind of just almost disappeared. And and the parents of this generation, where the children are younger, they're more much into ballet, they're more into doing other other sport, or leisure activities than what is we already have in our religion.
Yeah, so instead of going to the Gurdwara, they might want to go and play football instead.
It happens. I'm seeing that with my children.
Yeah.
I'm seeing that and the Gurdwara doesn't really serve. It doesn't serve the children's needs. It can't connect with them. They cannot understand the language that is being used. That simply the children would just sit there, and unless you're in my days I would translate to the children, I would explain things to the children, but I think there's a complete disconnect.
And that disconnect is what our gurus were trying to overcome through creating Gurumukhi, so that we could read the Gurbani without any mediation. But now, not only do we're not able to read Gurbani, we're not the people to explain. They don't have, especially in the Western world. I don't know what it's like in the Punjab, but in the Western world, if they don't understand the language and the circumstances. For example, when I speak with people from the Punjab, they don't understand racism because they think, from their point of view, we are living in the West and we have all these opportunities. They only see opportunities. They don't see the obstacles that we face.
Absolutely. But with Punjabi, when I say I am worried, I'm not even in the villages, because I still have family, even though I haven't got any family living in a village anymore because they moved to cities, but I always visit village. I always have connection there. And then I was talking to a lady who used to look after my mom. Her daughter-in-law kind of rang me the other day, and I was talking to, they've had children, they are little ones, and one of the things, he doesn't go to the local school, he goes to the English school. And even at that level, the schools that are seen as second class.
Yes.
English schools are taking precedence, they are taking priority, and people will go and pay hefty fees at an English school, then send their children to the local school. And that is the level of, I think it's our language has been eroded.
Yes, yeah, because in terms of social mobility, they know that they need to have an English education in order to get a job, especially like a government job, for example. They would need to have English for that, not Punjabi. And so that's where, so we're dealing with the same kinds of issues that existed 500 years ago in terms of opportunities available for people in their own language and using their own identity.
Absolutely. Rather than really promoting both language, yes, English is national language, but then that is now given precedent over everything else. Both should go hand in hand.
Yeah. So it's not about bilingualism. And we all know that research shows that bilingual children do so much better. So it doesn't hinder progress if they are bilingual. But yeah, so anyway, we have talked about a lot, we've covered a lot, so thank you very much, Sukhchandan Kaur.
Thank you,
I've
Ji.
loved my conversation with you, and Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਬਹੁਤ ਸ਼ੁਕਰੀਆ ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ ਵੈਰੀ ਮਚ for talking
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ